Hey everybody, this video is sponsored by my good friends over at Skylum. Today we're going to take a look at their brand new piece of software, their application called Luminar NEO. It is built, kind of rebuilt from the ground up for better performance and a heavy focus on AI-driven tools. That's artificial intelligence. It's not scary, it's not difficult, it's exciting, it's fun, it's easy. You're going to see how cool it is in this video. You can use Luminar NEO as a standalone application or as a plugin for Lightroom or Photoshop. It is so versatile. Think of it as another whole set of tools you can add to the tools that you already use to do all sorts of cool and exciting things. We're going to take a look at this stuff right now, so let's go. Okay, so here we are in Luminar NEO. Now, Luminar is not exactly like a lot of other photo editors that you may be used to, where you just push and pull sliders. Let me show you how it works. I'm going to begin with this photo of this mountain range here, and I'm going to come up here to the top of my screen and choose the Edit button. This brings me into my editing window. I've got some layers off to my left because I can work with multiple layers in here. And then I've got all these different tools or effects or filters off here to the right. The way this works is there are sliders and things like that. So if I were to enter into the develop mode here and fuss with the exposure, sure, I change the exposure, and then as soon as I close this develop module, it stacks that as one of my edits over here in the edits panel. And at this point, I could select this, I can hit the undo button, I can hit the little trash button to get rid of it. Well, there's no trash button that appears when it's your first develop edit. This is a raw photo, by the way. So as we add any of these different effects, if we were to add some structure, which is kind of like the clarity slider on steroids, we can close that and we can see that that also now is going to show up as an edit here. And if I go back and open up structure again, it's not going to open that same structure. It would be me adding a second level of this structure edit to my image. And if I go back to edits, you can see, look at that, there's two structures. I actually want 0 structures, so I'm gonna hit the undo and the trash can to get rid of both of those little edit tool funky things that I did. So let's do something here to this mountain image. We're gonna jump right into the artificial intelligence stuff. Here under the erase tool, we have this button called remove dust spots. Look at all these big dust spots in the sky. Let's see what it does. And just like that, you can see it gets rid of the spots. If there are any spots that it missed, you have this eraser tool where you can click over it. Let's say we want this cloud to be treated as a spot. We can click over it and just give Luminar a second. And, oh, well, I'm sorry, we have to come and hit the erase button. What am I thinking? And you can see away it goes just like that. We close up the erase effect or the erase tool, and it's been added to the list of our edits. Let's jump again into the artificial intelligence and add a new sky. So we're going to come here to the sky adjustment. From sky selection, we can choose any number of the skies that come with Luminar. Let's go with this bottom middle one because it's dramatic and it's kind of cool. Now Luminar is just working to automatically detect the sky and mask the sky right into place. As you can see, just happened. We got a couple little issues, namely the top of this mountain looks a little fuzzy and funky, and over here looks a little funky as well. Guess what? We can change sky orientation, which is just like moving your image around. We don't need that. The mask refinement is what we're interested in. We can increase the global mask refinement. That looks like it's making the mountains disappear more though. So let's actually kind of undo global quite a bit. And then we're gonna work to close the gaps in our mask and see what that does. Well, we don't want to completely undo that. Let's find kind of a happy medium there in the middle. And then we can also try fix details to see how that adjusts things. Just like so. So that quickly we can replace the sky. We can relight the scene. It allows for the color coming out of the sky to reflect off of shiny surfaces like the snow, like water, things like that. So you can relight the scene, just really influence a lot of that orange and red, which is cool. If there's particularly a human that Luminar has picked out, you can also specifically relight the human, make sure they're either bright enough or dark enough to kind of match the scene. We have reflection, which is kind of the reflection here off the snow. You see if I increase that reflection kind of gets bigger. Kind of the default works good for us. And then there in the sky adjustments, if it's an image that's blurry behind your subject, you can defocus it. You can add grain to help match the grain that is natively in your image. Add a little atmospheric haze. Maybe it's a humid day, whatever. I might just increase the warmth of the sky a little bit because warmth is always nice. And then you also have this brightness. I might tick the brightness down a couple ticks just like that. And we just replace the sky. Now I'm going to come up here to enhance. This is another one of the artificial intelligence features. There's this really cool accent slider and sky enhancer. They're just kind of like a make my image look better slider is a good way to think about it. But of course, use at your own discretion, because what the artificial engine, the computer brain, thinks looks good may not be what you think looks good. So just take it with a grain of salt. Maybe throw a little accent in there, a little sky enhancer, if it actually enhances the sky according to you. Next, I want to throw some light into the foreground. We're going to do that with Develop, and this is going to bring us into this idea of masking. So each of these tools and each of these edits that we're adding to our stack, they have the ability to have masks attached to every single one of them. So if I come here to if I come here to Develop, I should say, I'm going to select Masking. Now here in Mask, there's a bunch of stuff. We're going to focus a little bit on Mask AI in a little bit, but for now, I'm going to use a standard linear gradient. The way this works is I click and drag up, and any areas that are covered in red are going to be what are affected by this develop effect now. So you can see I'm just saying like, hey, brighten up the foreground and fade it up toward the horizon. Then I'm going to go ahead and select adjustments here, and I'm going to boost the exposure just a little bit. We want to keep it kind of, subtle. We're going to flood the shadows with a little bit of light as well. Maybe pump the highlights a little, see if we can kick up a little contrast there in the snow, and maybe actually reduce the contrast, therefore tampering down on any of those highlights, but also sort of leveling up some of the shadows just a little bit. So just something like that, just a nice subtle effect. I would collapse my develop effect, and then I'm going to come down here to the landscape tool, and I could also use masking for this. I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm going to dehaze the whole image. I was thinking about constraining it just to the foreground again, but I think we're all right. I'm going to boost the golden hour look. It's going to really give us some fire in the clouds up there. There is also this foliage enhancer. The foliage in this image essentially is a silhouette, so we're not going to be enhancing much of anything. It's just a nice silhouette. So a nice little just boost to the color. And then the final little thing we want to do here is this color harmony tool, and we're going to increase the brilliance just 1 or 2 ticks. You got to be careful with it. You can really send things off the deep end either way. We're going to go to color contrast. I'm sorry, we're not going to do anything with color contrast. Split color warmth is what I wanted. We're going to increase the warmth of the top and then reduce the coolness down here, something like so. And then here for color balance, if you're familiar with color balance in Photoshop, you got your cyans paired against your reds. We're going to increase the red in the image, maybe push that to about 10. We'll increase the magenta also as well, maybe go -5, and then increase the blue, maybe something like +10, +11, whatever, something like that. It's really increased the contrast quite a bit. So at this point, you may go back and do something like under Develop, come down here to Curves, and just lift the shadows and reduce the highlights, something like that, and then add just some mid-tone contrast, something like so. And you can see here, if we hit the preview button at the bottom, this is the image we've ended up with. But we started with this. And just a few clicks later, only a couple minutes, we've completely transformed the image to this. Now, do you love the way this looks? I don't know. There's a few things I would want to continue adjusting, but it's taken us 5 or 6 minutes to do this. It really has not taken any time at all. So this is just some of the power of Luminar NEO, and I want to jump into a couple of the features more specifically now and share with you some of the things I really love about this application. So I want to talk next about the Mask AI functionality. We're going to jump into this photo here, this woman standing in her kitchen. I'll hit the edit button to bring us into our editing area. A lot of really neat things you can do. We're actually going to touch on kind of 2 things here. One of them is this Relight AI feature. What Relight does is it goes into your image, uses artificial intelligence, hence the AI on the name, and it tries to detect what is near, what is far in the image by developing this sort of 3D map that the back end of the technology is using to detect, hey, she's closer to the camera, heavy backlight, she's underexposed, we want to throw some light into her face as if we had some kind of flash. So the way I like to use this is just I crank brightness near to 100%. Give it a second to figure out where it's going. Luminar is making the mask right now, and by doing this extreme effect, you can see, hey, how good is the mask? Are there areas I need to go in and adjust and tweak and make right? And you can see it does a lot, and the mask actually looks pretty good. It's really detected where she is. I'll probably tone this back maybe to about 80, something like so. Depth at about 50 is good for this image, but sometimes you may want to adjust it and see what Luminar does in terms of picking up more or less of the foreground or background. We have these advanced settings, which can be really, really helpful. I'm going to go ahead and de-halo just because there is a little bit of darkness on the edges of her arms, so we'll get rid of some of that halo stuff. And then you can adjust the warmth or coolness of what Luminar perceives to be the foreground or the background. I don't need to fuss with that in this image. I'm okay. Let's move on from Relight. It's a really powerful little tool, and you can see here again, like everything else in Luminar, it's stacked right here in your edits. You can always come in and adjust it later. You can add a mask if you need to. Oh, I missed part of her hair or something. You can always do that. It's really, really flexible when it comes to that. I want to come in here to develop. There's a heavy vignette on this image. I'm going to come down here to optics, and I'm just going to pump D-vignette to about 150. And then I'm going to move right down here to the high key. It's one of the portrait tools. I'm going to hit a high key, and this is where we're going to talk about this mask AI functionality. So again, all these tools, they have this masking option. I'm going to select the masking option, and I'm going to hit Mask AI. Luminar is now going to have this kind of fancy schmancy animation that's going to go over your image. And what it's attempting to do here is pick out all of the different elements of your image. Is there a mountain? Is there a sky? Is there water? Is there a road? Is there a walkway? How many people are in there? All of these different elements, it's going to try to piece them out, and then you'll see it's going to create a list for us so we can select any part of the image we want and say, hey, target this adjustment just on that part of the image. And furthermore, once it has created this mask, you don't have to go through this process of waiting for the mask to be created for this image again. When you hit Mask AI on any of their tools, it's done. Luminar has already done the work. It's got the information. So you go through sort of this one time, creating this mask to break out all the pieces of your image, and you're good to go for as many times as you need to use this mask feature in your image. And you can see just like that, we have all of these different elements: human, sky, flora, architecture, the natural ground, man-made ground, different things like that. Flora, you can kind of interpret that as foliage. It's probably selecting the green stuff. But how do I know what the mask looks like? Well, you can click on any of these elements. Let's click on human here, and you're going to see that it highlights her in red. And of course, whatever's covered with that kind of red ruby overlay, that's what is going to get the effect. Now here's the problem. We want to apply this high key effect to the rest of the room and not to her. How do we do that? Well, the cool thing about Mask AI, one of the cool things about it, is that it's highly versatile as well. So the mask is still all there, even though we can't see it. If you click Mask Actions, you can choose to show your mask. There is the mask which we've selected. Remember, we selected just her. I can select the Mask AI again, come in here, and choose any other part of the image if I like. In fact, you can select multiple parts of the image if you want. I'm going to deselect architecture, though, because I don't want that. I'm going to just keep her selected. And under here, under Mask Actions, we have Show, so we can see what's going on. I want to invert this mask. So we're going to use the fact that it selected her to actually target all of the rest of the image. So I'm going to hit Invert here, and very quickly you can see it selects the rest of the image. This is now the part of the image that high key is going to attack. It's going to leave her alone. It's going to attack the rest of the room. And we want to make it more of a high key room. So we want to really brighten things and blow things out. We're going to push amount up to about 85, standard high key to about 65, dynamic high key also to about 65. We're going to drop the blacks to about 25, something like so. We can see we've really brightened up her surroundings. I'm going to collapse high key, and the last thing we might want to do is just come back and add another develop effect here under adjustments, under light. We're just going to boost the contrast, or the exposure a little bit. We are going to throw contrast into there to really give it that high key, just bite. And then under blacks and whites, we're going to reduce the whites a little bit to just make it a little easier on the eyes. And I'm also going to reduce the blacks a little bit to just throw a little bit more of a kick into those shadows. So what does all of this look like? Well, here's our finished image. Let's see what it looked like when we opened it. Yeah. So you can see quite a big difference in just a few clicks. All of those masks automatically generated, and it's looking pretty good. So it's here at this point that I want to let you guys know, if you're interested in Luminar, if you want to pick up a copy for yourself, you can buy it once and be done with paying for it. That's kind of nice. There's a link down in the description. You can follow that link. You get a discount for coming through my video. Yeah, go check it out. If you're interested, even if you're not interested right now, check it out. It's worthwhile. Maybe tomorrow you'll be interested, or next month, or next year, or some other time. The technology is probably only going to get better. So let's now move on to the next part of this video. Okay, so that's fun. Let's go on to the next feature I want to talk to you about, and this is the portrait background removal tool. It's a really neat little feature here in Luminar. I'm going to select this photo of this model, open her up by hitting the edit button here. Here she is. Big hair, blowing in the wind or the fan, most likely. We're going to go ahead and try out this feature and try to knock away the background as quickly as possible. So hit Layer Properties. This is where it's located. Layer Properties, Masking, and we have this feature called Portrait Background. Go ahead and select that. Luminar is going to take a second, detect the edges. It was literally about a second. And then we're going to hit the Remove button. And now that the edges have been detected, Luminar is going to go through and it's going to knock away the background. Let's see how good or bad of a job it does. But we have options. You can see it did a pretty good job. Very admirable for taking just about 10 seconds. We have a lot of gray left in the hair, so we can fix that. We have this brush right here, the refinements brush at the bottom of the layer properties masking section. Select that refinements brush. The brown or the beige, that's the object that is to remain. The bluish stuff, that's the background that we're getting rid of. And then we have this transition brush, which is what we're going to use here. We paint this over the areas that we're saying, look, there's all of this grayness up here in her hair still. So consider the brown of her hair that you have in the beige object area. Oh, artificial intelligence, save all that brown hair and get rid of the gray stuff. And you can see what it does. It does a pretty darn good job. Let's select right there, one click, just to kind of clean up in that area. And cool, we can select the refinements brush drop down, look at the selection we've made. If we zoom in down under her chin, there's a little bit of haloing left. We could go and paint that away. I'm not gonna take the time to do it right now because I wanna get on to the next part of this, and that is adding a new background behind her. We can come over here to our layers section and hit the big plus button. You can load in your own external image. I've already loaded in the image that I wanna use. It's this interior photo, so I'll click it. Luminar is gonna place it in my image. And I'm just gonna scale it up a little bit just so it kind of fits and covers everything. That's great. And I'm gonna make sure the opacity is set to 100%. Now, obviously we have a problem because we can't see her anymore. Let me just expand the size of the image a little bit more. We can't see her because, as you can see, our background is on top of her layer. So we want to drag this background down beneath her, and you can see, look at that. You can really see that gray coming out of her chin. It's like almost a fuzzy goatee. Not the most flattering look, but again, we're not going to touch it right now. We're instead going to try to blow out the background a little bit to help just kind of bring all this together a little bit. We're going to make the background like a high-key lifestyle commercial look, kind of like we did earlier with our Mask AI section of this video. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down right away to Atmosphere. This is an artificial intelligence feature. You can just kind of fill a room with fog or smoke. If you've worked on any of these commercial shoots, a lot of times you're running smoke machines. That is all good. So we're just going to add a little bit of smoke to the room. It's very easy and simple to do. And then I'm going to come down here to the portrait section to high key. And here we don't need to mask anything because we want to make the whole room pretty high key. We're going to push it up to about 40, 45. We'll bump up standard. We'll bump up dynamic high key, something like so. We want to keep the blacks, kind of hold them steady so we get some good contrast in the deep parts of the image. We'll increase the glowiness of this. Just give it that kind of misty, ethereal, type of high-key lifestyle look. Maybe I'll reduce the overall high-key effect a little bit, bump the contrast a little bit, something like so. And you can see just that easy. We've gone ahead and we have cut out a pretty complex head of hair. It's done a really nice job. And then we throw her over this background. Is it perfect? No, there's still all kinds of other adjustments that could be made. But you can see very quickly you can begin throwing together images and pulling together even these type of complex selections. Okay, moving along, I want to take a look at a feature called Relight AI. This one's pretty simple, very versatile. We kind of touched on it before. I'm going to open up this wedding couple photo here. And you can see it's a nice photo. Now, it's just a JPEG we're working with, so we have some limitations in terms of quality and grain and things like that cropping up. But I want to share with you this Relight AI feature here. This is really cool, and this is a great image for something like this, where it would just be useful to have a little bit more light thrown into the bride and groom. So again, I'm going to pump it up to 100, wait for Luminar to do its thing and detect them and cut them out. And you can see what it's done. It's made a mask, and I can see the edges. Her hair looks pretty good. His hair looks pretty good. The back of the suit, the back of her dress, all great. Way too much light. So now we tone it back to like 25, 35, something like that, and see what that looks like. I might want to do a little bit more. Maybe I'll push it up to 55 or so. And we can see very, very easily, we use this relight feature to take them from being very dark to just changing the lighting of the scene. It doesn't need to be dramatic changes all the time. In fact, sometimes the dramatic changes, often the dramatic changes, don't look all that good. So we want to make sure that we're being nice and subtle with the stuff we're doing. And in the vein of being subtle, let's go and do a full sky replacement now and do something that's very not subtle. I want to open up this lake image here, and I'm going to jump over to the edit area. Check this out. We got all these craggy mountains. We've got a big lake that should be reflecting the sky. We've got a little dock doodad here sticking out into the lake. Let's go ahead and use the Sky AI feature here and do a nice, very red. We're going to go with another very rich sunset sky. Again, give Luminar just a moment. It's going to detect all these rocks and everything, get our sky in there, and begin to change the color of the overall image. Now we can see there's some issues with the tops of some of these mountains. So this is where a mask refinement comes into play. Turn global all the way up, turn it all the way down, see what looks better to you. Well, turning global all the way down does not look good at all. So we definitely don't want to do that. We can try closing the gaps. Let's see how much that does for us. That looks like it's opening up and allowing some of the old clouds to come through. We don't want to do that. Let's try turning that down a little bit. There we go. That's closing off some of that stuff. That looks pretty good. And then we can try to fix details, things just along the edges of the mountains. Pretty solid. Great. And now we're going to go to scene relighting. We want to do a pretty heavy scene relight because the sky has a lot of color. And we can even go ahead and attack this a little bit with Mask AI and just add a lot of magenta into these mountains, magentas and reds, things like that. Relight saturation, probably add a little bit of saturation there. There's no human. We don't need to worry about relight human. And then you have this reflection option because if you look, the sky is automatically being reflected in this big lake. So we can increase that reflection. We can say, yeah, kick that reflection up to 100, or we can just make it a bit more subtle. I'm more of a subtle guy myself sometimes, so I'm going to just set that to 40. And then you have some sky adjustments. We might just warm the sky up just a touch, something like that. And we've gone through and made a wholesale sky adjustment. Now I'm going to choose develop. I'm going to go to masking. We're going to hit that masking AI option in here because I want to pick out this foreground and get to work adjusting that. And Mask AI does its thing. I'm going to select the sky because that's what I'm interested in here. So I'm going to go back into my main masking area here in the develop module. Or the develop tool. I'm going to hit linear gradient. And remember, we want to just affect the entire image except for the sky. So we're going to pull this straight up and I'll pull it straight up, kind of something like that. It looks kind of funky because the sky is selected. So I'm going to hit linear gradient to go back. I'm going to choose Mask AI. The whole mask is still in here and we're going to deselect sky. So we're going to say, look, just punch the sky out, but everything else, be working on it. That's what we're trying to tell it. So we're going to go back to our adjustments here, and we're going to begin applying some adjustments. So we want to put some contrast into here. And again, we want to begin adding more of those reds and blues from the sky. So let's go curves. Let's just add some red to our foreground. Don't go too crazy. We'll add a little magenta into the darker areas by dragging the black point of the green channel in our curves. Then we're going to add a little bit of blue as well. And maybe actually not blue, maybe a little bit of yellow. So we're going to drag down on the top slide or something like so. And then we'll come here into color. We're going to pump up the magenta. I think we'll make it a little warmer, something like that. And then if it's a little bit too heavy, just back the vibrance off. Vibrance is a little bit more of a subtle way to adjust saturation. And I think we'll kind of leave it at that. I'll hit develop to close that. And we can just do a quick before. That's what our image looked like before. Hey, it's a great image. No doubt about it. But you can see very quickly we can make these wholesale changes to it here in Luminar. And again, on the heels of talking about being subtle, we made a very extreme and over-the-top adjustment to an image. But hey, life is short and variety is the spice of life. And hey, again, if you're interested in anything you're seeing here, you want to check out Luminar more for yourself, pick up a copy, hey, whatever. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you can check out the link for Luminar down in the description to this video. Let's get on and wrap this video up. Okay, a couple last things I want to show you. First and foremost, this power line removal feature here in Luminar, which is quite powerful, no pun intended. Let's go ahead and select this photo of the Hollywood sign here. I'm going to hit edit to jump into my editing section. And this is just an incredible tool and it works so well virtually all the time. There's some little adjustments you might have to make here and there, but look at all these power lines and it's over a complex and difficult to extract from background. I'm going to hit the erase tool and I'm just going to hit the object removal, remove power lines feature. I'm going to give Luminar just a few seconds. It's going to find all these, zip, 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 and knock them out. You're going to see the kind of job it does in just a second. Yeah, so as you can see, it's pretty quick and it's pretty powerful. There's a couple things there. It nipped to the top of the Hollywood sign, but we can have our eraser tool set to restore. We could paint that back. Also, the radio tower up here kind of bazooked, but we could bring that back as well. The point is, though, it got rid of a lot of power lines very, very quickly. We're not going to go through and fine tune it right this moment, but an incredibly powerful tool that that little remove power lines feature. Now, the last thing I want to show you, it's kind of the catch-all. It's kind of the, I just want my image to look better. What do I do in 30 seconds kind of tool? And it is called Enhance. Some people may refer to it as the accent slider, but it's a really neat feature. Like I said, this feature it's just I want to make my image look better in 30 seconds. What do I do? Here, there is this Enhance AI option. Again, it is the computer just saying, look, these are the features, these are the adjustments that we think are going to make your image look best. So use at your own discretion, but allow the computer to make a suggestion as well. We'll crank this to 100%, and you can see what it does. It brightens the foreground. It kind of does some of that Relight AI action. It keeps the contrast. It boosts the color and the contrast out in the foliage, corrects some of the color for us, sharpens some of the edges. It does a lot. There is a sky enhancer as well, but we don't have much sky here to enhance. But you can see it's done quite a bit. If I'm being picky, I could go in and say, I really don't like that blue haze. There's a little bit too much humidity in the air. I could come down here to color, and I could say HSL, and I could say, hey, give me that saturation option. Take those blues, get those blues out of here. We don't want those blues. We want to simplify the image. Maybe take the blues and swing them more toward teal or more toward purple, something like that. I guess it really doesn't matter because we just made them invisible. So this is a really, really fast way to go in and just clean up an image very, very fast. Pretty cool. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do one more image just to show you it's not a fluke thing. Let me find an image. Let's go with this image here. I believe this is Lake Bled out in Slovenia. I'm going to hit edit. And the first thing, of course, would be let's get rid of as much of this dust as possible. I could do it automatically. I think I'm just going to manually come in here and paint over this and say, yeah, all my dust is right here and right over here. Just clean that up for me, please, Luminar. And it does a fine job for us. And then I'll just go back to Enhance and let's say, hey, go ahead and pump up the accent. Great. We're just introducing all kinds of contrast and all sorts of changes. That's really nice. Again, you have your masking feature. If you just are looking at your image and say that car in the foreground really needs to be boomified and blown up and it needs to pop, or the sky needs to change, you can use it and have a lot of control over it. I would then probably go into develop here. I just can't resist, guys. I have to keep tinkering and tweaking, warm this image up a little bit, maybe change the tint a little as well, do something like that. We can collapse that. And of course, landscape, always nice. Add a little bit of golden hour edge to this image. We could dehaze it a little bit to just really cause the midtones to pop. And then here we have lots of visible foliage, so we can do a foliage enhancement. But you can see as I enhance the foliage, it really kind of crushes these clouds and this what now looks like piece of swampy mass in the foreground. That's where you can go in with your mask, the brush tool. We're going to erase. We're going to say, look, just don't do that here to us here. Maybe also up here, just kind of settle down a little bit. And you can see it just pulls back on that a little bit and allows us to maintain the beautification of the rest of the image. Structure AI, like I said, this is another artificial intelligence feature. It's kind of like the clarity slider, but on steroids. That's nice as well. So a lot of different things you can do, and a lot of really cool stuff that Luminar NEO gives you and leaves to your disposal. We can see there's before and there's after. So we've just taken a very flat kind of monotone image and just infused it with a lot of just stuff. We're just throwing a lot of stuff at it. So that is going to be it for my coverage of Luminar NEO. It is a great tool. Like I said, standalone app. You can use it as a plugin with Photoshop and Lightroom. It's right there under the filters menu. Super duper easy to use. I hope you enjoy it. Link to check out Luminar is down in the description. Thank you guys so much for sticking around and checking this out. Check out Luminar for yourself. See if it's something you think that would work with your workflow. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.